The upside down isn't fiction. It's a memory, a bruised reflection of something older, something that exists in the oldest maps of reality itself. The writers of Stranger Things didn't invent that dark mirror world. They borrowed it, softened it, made it survivable for television. The original is called the Shadowfell, and the original is worse. My name is Vel. That's not what my mother called me, but I don't use that name anymore. Names have weight in the Shadowfell. Speaking your true name, there is like bleeding in shark-infested waters. I was a scout for a merchant caravan. 14 years ago, we took a shortcut through a place where the barriers between worlds had come apart at the seams. I was the only one who came back. 97 days. That's how long I was trapped inside. It felt like 3 years. I know because I counted. I counted my heartbeats when I couldn't sleep. I counted the dust motes falling through dead air. I counted the breaths between one gray hour and the next, and each breath took longer than the one before, until I forgot what it felt like for time to move at all. We didn't know we'd crossed over. That's the first thing you need to understand. The Shadowfell doesn't announce itself. There's no gate, no portal, no dramatic threshold. One moment, we were riding through a forest at dusk. The next moment, the dusk had deepened. The shadows between the trees stretched longer than they should have. The birdsong stopped, not faded, stopped, like a hand had closed around every throat at once. I thought a storm was coming. Then I looked up and saw the sky. Gray. Not overcast. Gray. The color of old bones. The color of ash that's been wet and dried again. No sun, no clouds. Just an endless, flat expanse of nothing where the heavens should be. The air tasted like a room that's been closed for decades, dead and wet at the same time. It clung to my skin like damp silk, like something that wanted inside. And the silence. Not quiet. Silence. The kind of silence that has weight. It pressed against my ears until I could hear the blood moving through my skull, hear my own teeth settling in my jaw. I called out to the others. My voice left my mouth and died 3 feet from my face. The sound just stopped, swallowed, like the air itself was hungry. That's when I knew we weren't in our world anymore. The Shadowfell is a dark reflection of the material plane. Every mountain that exists in our world casts a shadow into that place. Every city, every forest, every road. But the reflections are wrong. We found Thornwall, the village we'd been traveling toward, 3 days into our wandering. It sat exactly where it should have been. Same layout, same buildings, same well in the center of the square. Empty, not abandoned, empty. I pushed open the door to the tavern and found tables set for meals that had never been eaten. Dust lay on the plates in perfect circles, undisturbed by any breath. The hearths were cold, not burned out. Cold, but never lit cold. The stones had no soot, no memory of warmth. I touched one of the beds, and the sheets crumbled under my fingers. Not rotted, just thin. As if they'd been made from the idea of cloth instead of actual thread. This is what the Shadowfell does. It copies the shape of things, but not the substance. In Stranger Things, the upside down is Hawkins covered in rot and vines. Organic decay, living corruption. The Shadowfell is worse because nothing is rotting. Nothing is alive enough to rot. By the 5th day, I noticed I wasn't hungry. Not, I didn't feel like eating. I mean, hunger itself had become distant. A memory of a sensation rather than the sensation itself. I ate anyway, forced myself. The bread tasted like chalk dust. The dried meat sat on my tongue like wet leather and wouldn't go down no matter how long I chewed. Corin, our caravan master, said he felt fine, said we were all overreacting, Said we just needed to find the border and cross back. His voice was flat when he said it. I remember staring at his face, waiting for him to smile. Corin always smiled when he was trying to convince people. It was his tell, that crooked grin that made everyone trust him. His face didn't move. The words came out, but his face didn't move at all. I'd known Corin for 6 years. He was a man who laughed at his own jokes, who sang drinking songs off-key, who got angry at broken axles, and joyful at successful trades. I tried to make him laugh. I told him the story about the merchant's daughter in Willowmere, the one that always made him wheeze until he couldn't breathe. He stared at me. "That's funny," he said. His face didn't move. That night I lay awake and tried to remember what my mother's voice sounded like. I knew she had a voice. I knew facts about it. Soft, slightly hoarse, she hummed when she worked. But the sound itself was gone. Just a shape where a memory should be. The Shadowfell doesn't kill you quickly. It doesn't need to. It drains you. The plane bleeds the life out of everything that enters it. Slowly, gently, like warmth leaving a corpse. I watched Corin leave on day 9. He didn't say goodbye. He didn't say anything. We were walking through what had been a field, gray grass that crunched like old paper under our feet, and he just stopped. I took 3 more steps before I realized he wasn't beside me anymore. I turned around. He was standing very still, looking toward the tree line, toward the mist that pooled between the dead trunks. It wasn't normal mist. It didn't move like water vapor. It moved like something breathing, expanding, contracting, slow and patient. The color of it was wrong too, not white, not gray, but somehow both and neither. Like looking at something your eyes refuse to process. "Corin." He didn't turn around. "Corin." I walked toward him. His face was slack. His eyes were fixed on the mist. This close, I could see it reaching toward him. Tendrils of nothing, curling at the edges, tasting the air between them. I grabbed his arm. His skin was cold. Not dead cold, empty cold, like touching a clay pot that had never held warmth. "Corin, we need to go." He pulled his arm free, gently, without looking at me. And then he walked toward the mist. 1 step, 2. I called his name again. 3 steps. 4. The mist curled around his ankles like a cat greeting its owner. I should have run after him. I should have tackled him, dragged him back, done something. I stood there and watched. 5 steps. 6. The mist rose to his waist, his chest, his shoulders. He didn't look back. Not once. Then the gray swallowed him, and the space where he'd been was just empty air. I stood there for a long time. I don't know how long. Eventually, Mira touched my shoulder and said we should keep moving. Her voice was flat. Mine was too when I answered. On day 12, we met people who had stopped feeling anything at all. They emerged from the tree line without sound. I didn't hear footsteps, didn't hear breathing. One moment the space between the trees was empty, and the next moment they were there. Elven features, but wrong. Their skin was the color of old parchment left in a damp basement, yellowish gray, with a texture like paper that had been wet and dried too many times. Their hair hung like white cobwebs, limp and dry. And their eyes, I've seen dead eyes before. I've seen the eyes of people who have given up. These were emptier than that. These reflected nothing. Not light, not life, not thought. Looking into them was like looking into holes. Shadarkai. They had been elves once, or something like elves. The Shadowfell has a way of making origins irrelevant. They smelled like old stone, like caves that have never seen sunlight. Cold radiated off them the way heat radiates off a forge. I could feel it on my skin from 10 feet away. They didn't attack us. They just watched. One of them spoke. Her voice was like dry leaves scraping stone. "You still have color in your cheeks," she said. Her eyes moved to my face but didn't quite focus, like she was looking through me at something behind. "That will fade." She was looking at me like I was already a corpse, like she was just waiting for me to realize it. "The door home," I said. My voice sounded thin, desperate, foreign in my own ears. "Where is it?" She smiled. At least, her mouth moved into the shape of a smile. The muscles in her face shifted, but nothing reached her eyes. Nothing reached anything. "There is no door," she said. "There is only here. There is only waiting. Eventually you will understand. Eventually you will stop wanting to leave." She gestured to the others in her group. A dozen of them, standing perfectly still, perfectly patient. I hadn't seen any of them blink, not once. We all stopped wanting to leave. Then they walked back into the trees, silent, unhurried. Their feet didn't make any sound on the dead grass. We never saw them again. But sometimes, in the weeks that followed, I would feel eyes on me, watching from the colorless spaces between the trees, waiting for my color to fade. The Shadar Kai serve a goddess. She doesn't have a true name anymore, or if she does, speaking it is forbidden. They call her the Raven Queen, the Matron of Death, the Lady of Winter's Chill. She claims a domain within the Shadowfell, a fortress built from memories and silence, they say. The souls of the dead pass through her realm on their way to whatever comes next. She watches them, judges them, sends them onward. But she keeps some. The ones who interest her. The ones who fought death in ways she found amusing. The ones who have secrets she wants to add to her collection. I never saw her. Thank whatever gods still listen, I never saw her. But I felt her attention once. It was the 23rd night. I was huddled in the shell of a building that looked like a temple, but had never held worship. The altar was smooth, unmarked, no offerings ever placed on its surface. I was cold. I'd been cold for days. The kind of cold that starts in your chest and spreads outward, the kind that has nothing to do with temperature. I was trying to remember my mother's face. I could remember that she had a face. I could remember facts about her. Brown hair, gap in her teeth, hands that smelled like bread. But the image itself was gone, replaced by static, by nothing. I squeezed my eyes shut and tried harder, reached for the memory like reaching into dark water, and something reached back. The cold in my chest turned sharp, focused. I felt pressure behind my eyes, not pain, pressure, like something pressing its face against the inside of my skull and looking out through my sockets. My skin prickled everywhere at once. The hair on my arms stood up, the hair on my neck. I could feel myself being read, not watched. Read, like a book being opened and paged through. Every memory I'd ever had, every secret I'd ever kept, every shameful thought I'd ever buried, all of it suddenly accessible, exposed, examined. I stopped trying to remember. I stopped thinking entirely, made my mind blank, small, uninteresting, a book with nothing written in it, not worth keeping. The pressure faded. The cold in my chest softened back to its usual ache. The presence moved on. I sat there shaking until what passed for morning came. I don't know what would have happened if I'd kept reaching. I don't know what she would have done if she'd found something worth keeping. On day 31, I met something worse than the Shadar Kai. I didn't know what it was, just a figure standing at the edge of the village we'd been sheltering in. Humanoid, tall, arms too long for its body, hanging past its knees, the fingers trailing in the gray dust. It wasn't moving, just standing there, facing away from me. I should have run. But I hadn't spoken to anyone in 6 days. Corin was gone. Mira had stopped responding to her name. She still walked when I walked. Stopped when I stopped, but her eyes had gone flat, and she hadn't said a word in 4 days. I was alone. And some ember in my chest, some dying spark of the person I used to be, wanted contact. Any contact. I took 3 steps toward it. The gray grass crunched under my feet. The figure didn't move. 2 more steps, close enough now to see the texture of its skin, pale, waxy, like candle tallow. Hairless. I couldn't tell where its clothes ended and its flesh began. 1 more step. Hello? My voice was a croak. I'd forgotten what talking felt like. That's when it turned around. Its face was smooth, blank, no eyes, no nose, no mouth. Just an unbroken expanse of that waxy flesh, stretched tight over a skull that was almost human-shaped, but not quite. And it was crying. Tears rolled down that featureless surface from somewhere, tracking wet lines through the pallid skin, dripping off where a jaw should have been. It made a sound, not from a mouth. It had no mouth. The sound came from everywhere, from its whole body, a low, keening moan, like wind through a cracked window, like a child crying in another room. And when it saw me, when it somehow perceived me without eyes, it reached out, both arms, those 2 long arms with their trailing fingers, not reaching to grab, reaching to hold, the way you'd reach for someone you loved, someone you'd missed, someone you needed to never let go of. I stumbled backward. It took a step forward, still reaching, still crying, still making that sound. I understood then what it wanted, not to hurt me, to have me, to wrap those arms around me and pull me close and never, never let me be alone again. Neither of us. Together. Forever. In the gray. I ran. My legs remembered how to run before my mind did. I ran faster than I'd moved in weeks. Behind me, I heard it following. Not running. Walking. Patient. Unhurried. It didn't need to chase. It knew I'd get tired. It knew I'd stop eventually. Everyone stops eventually. It followed me for 3 days. I would find somewhere to hide, wedge myself into a crack in a wall or a hollow under a collapsed roof, and I would wait. And then I would hear it, that keening moan, getting closer, always getting closer. I lost it in a ravine on the 3rd day. Climbed down where it couldn't follow, squeezed through a gap too narrow for those long arms. I lay at the bottom of that ravine for hours, listening. The sound faded. Eventually. I learned later what the scholars call such things: sorrows worn, manifestations of negative emotions given physical form. That one was born from loneliness. From the ache of isolation so deep it became a creature. I don't know if it's still out there, still wandering the gray villages, still looking for someone to hold. Sometimes when I'm alone too long, I think I can hear that keening, distant, patient, waiting for me to get lonely enough to stop running. I found Mira on day 38. I almost walked past her. She was standing at the edge of a cliff that overlooked nothing, just more gray, stretching to a horizon that seemed to recede the longer you looked at it. The wind should have been blowing. We were at the edge of a drop that went down forever. But the air was still, dead, like everything else. She wasn't moving, wasn't speaking. I walked around to face her, my feet crunching on the loose stone at the cliff's edge, and I looked at her eyes. They were open. They were empty. I've seen corpses with more life in their eyes. I've seen glass with more depth. She was still breathing. I could see her chest rising and falling, shallow and slow. Her heart was still beating. I pressed my fingers to her neck and felt the pulse, weak but present. But there was nothing behind her eyes, nothing that made her Mira. I said her name. My voice sounded flat. I noticed that but didn't feel anything about it. I told her about our caravan, about the villages we'd visited, about the song she used to sing when we made camp, the one about the sailor and the selkie. I hummed a few bars. Her face didn't change. I reached out and touched her cheek. Cold, not Shadowfell cold, just cold, like she'd already started becoming part of the gray. I stood there for a while. I don't know how long. Time had stopped meaning anything by then. Eventually, I stepped back. "Goodbye, Mira," I said. The words meant nothing. They were just sounds. I walked away from the cliff. I didn't look back. Not because it would have hurt too much, because it wouldn't have hurt at all. That's when I understood what I had become, not from reasoning it out, from the absence, from the nothing where grief should have been. That night, I made a decision. Not because I wanted to, I had stopped wanting anything. I made it because some splinter of who I used to be remembered wanting things, remembered feeling things. That splinter was almost gone, a candle flame guttering in a draft. But it was still there. I could feel it, barely. A faint warmth in my chest where everything else had gone cold. I decided that I would find a way out. Not because escape would make me happy. I couldn't remember what happy felt like. But because staying meant becoming one of those hollow watchers in the trees, meant standing at the edge of a cliff staring at nothing until my heart forgot how to beat. And the corpse of who I used to be refused to let that happen. The borders of the Shadowfell are not fixed. They shift. They breathe. Places where the barrier thins can become solid, and solid walls can become passages. I learned to feel them. The temperature changes. A brush of warmth against my face where warmth shouldn't exist. The way the gray became fractionally lighter near crossing points, as if the darkness itself was thinner there. And the smell. The dead air of the Shadowfell carries nothing. No scent, no life. But near the borders, I would catch hints of something else. Something alive. Grass after rain. Wood smoke, the sharpy, green smell of sap. I followed those hints for weeks. My feet bled. I didn't notice. Twice I found crossings that led nowhere, into deeper shadow, into places worse than where I'd been. Once, I stumbled into a domain ruled by something that had been a man once, before despair twisted him into a lord of his own private hell. There are places within the Shadowfell worse than the gray emptiness. Prisons ruled by dark lords who cannot escape their own damnation. But that is another story. On the 97th day, I found a forest. The trees were the same gray as everything else, but there were birds, shadows of birds without color, without song. But they moved. They flew. And beyond them, through a gap in the dead branches, I could see light. Not gray light. Yellow light. Warm light. I ran. My legs screamed in protest. I ran anyway. The trees blurred past me. The light grew brighter, warmer. I could smell grass, real grass. I could hear wind, real wind. The crossing was like stepping through a soap bubble. One moment, gray silence pressing against my skin. A feeling of resistance, of the Shadowfell not wanting to let go. Then a pop, a release, and suddenly there was air in my lungs that tasted like life. Birdsong exploded around me, real birds with real voices, singing because they were alive, and that was what living things did. The warmth hit my face like a physical blow. I fell to my knees in grass that was green, actually green, impossibly green. And the sun, burned in the sky like a wound made of gold. And I wept. I wept for the first time in 97 days. I was out. I was home. 97 days inside. It felt like 3 years. Every hour in that place stretched into something unbearable. Not because time moved differently, because despair makes every moment feel eternal. The color returned to my skin eventually. The hunger came back. The ability to feel joy, to feel anger, to feel fear. But not completely. Last spring, I watched the cherry blossoms fall in the Temple District. The petals drifted down like pink snow, and everyone around me smiled, pointed, laughed at the beauty of it. I understood that it was beautiful. I knew the facts of its beauty. I couldn't feel it. I stood there watching the petals fall and my chest stayed hollow. There are nights when I wake in silence and forget, for a terrible moment, which world I'm in. I lie in bed and listen for birdsong, and the seconds before it comes are the longest of my life. And there are memories that never came back. My mother's face is still static. My childhood home is still a blur of facts without images. The Shadowfell takes things from you. It doesn't always give them back. You've seen stranger things. You've watched 11 and her friends fight the Upside Down, close the gates, rescue the people who fell through, burn the vines and kill the monsters and come home bloodied but alive, and maybe you thought that was terrifying. It is. But it's also a kindness. It's a version of the dark mirror that can be fought. The real Shadowfell doesn't work that way. There is no gate to close because the Shadowfell isn't invading. It's always been there. It will always be there. It's the shadow that every source of light casts, and you cannot destroy a shadow without destroying the light. The Duffer Brothers understood the shape of the horror, the dark mirror, the drain, the things that live in the emptiness. They understood that Will Byers would come back different, quieter, haunted. They understood that the Upside Down would keep calling to him, keep pulling at the edges of his mind. That's real. That's what the Shadowfell does. I still feel it sometimes, like a cold hand resting on the back of my neck, like a voice at the edge of hearing, whispering that the gray is patient, the gray is waiting, the gray will always be there when I'm ready to stop running. But Stranger Things gave its heroes a chance to fight back. It gave them victories. In the real dark mirror, there is no fighting back. There is no victory. You can only endure. You can only try to hold on to the color in your cheeks before it fades, and sometimes that's not enough. Sometimes you become Shadar Kai, immortal, emotionless, hollow. Sometimes you become something like the creature that followed me for 3 days, crying tears from a face without eyes. Sometimes you just stop, like Mira, still breathing, still warm, but empty. So here's what I need you to understand. The Upside Down is Hawkins with the lights turned off. The Shadowfell is everywhere. It's on the other side of every shadow you've ever cast. Look down right now, at the floor, at the ground beneath your feet. There's a shadow there, falling from your body, following you wherever you go. That shadow touches the Shadowfell. It always has. Every time you've stood in sunlight, you've been inches away from that gray forever. Every time you've walked through a dark room, you've brushed against the place where color goes to die. 11 would not survive the real Shadowfell. Her powers would drain away like warmth from a corpse. Her hope would fade. Her memories would go gray, one by one, until she couldn't remember why she was fighting. Eventually, she'd stop wanting to leave. Everyone stops wanting to leave. If you ever find yourself in a forest at dusk, and the shadows seem longer than they should be, and the bird song stops, and the air tastes stale and dead. Turn around. Walk toward the light. Don't look back. The Shadowfell doesn't need to chase you. It doesn't need to catch you. It just needs to wait. And right now, while you're listening to this, your shadow is falling on the ground behind you. If you're inside, it's stretching toward the darkest corner of the room. If you're outside, it's pointing toward wherever the sun isn't. Don't turn around. Don't look at it. But know that it's there, and know that if you stared at it long enough, in the right kind of silence, you might notice the edges starting to blur, the darkness starting to deepen, the gray starting to spread. Keep your eyes forward. Keep walking toward the light. And try very hard not to wonder what's waiting on the other side of your shadow. Waiting, patient, forever.